As autumn wanes, the last of the colorful leaves turn brown and crunchy. The air grows ever colder and thoughts of home overtake us. Here in the U.S., Thanksgiving is fast approaching, with Christmas on its heels, and during this time it seems that everyone grows nostalgic for the company of family and a warm pumpkin pie. Isn't that opening tune lovely and familiar? It's an instrumental version of a classic holiday song, Over the River and Through the Wood. Even the first line of this composition tempts us to follow our hearts back home to a time of rich hot cocoa, fresh, soft holiday cookies, and delectable homemade meals prepared by the ever-present, ever-busy hands of our parents and our grandparents. The remainder of the song is comprised of jolly wishes, a narration of the chilly journey, and excitement for grandmother with her precious baking expertise. Over the River was written as a child's Thanksgiving poem upon its first conception, and was later put to music. The lyrics are credited to Lydia Maria Child, who was with us from 1802 until 1880. Although in her poem she wrote of one journey, I am certain that she had many, and that maybe she faced her own paranormal or otherworldly experiences as she traveled. For if you are yet to know, many strange things await you on the road home. Imagine, if you will, that you are on your merry path to Grandma's house, and as is custom for this time period, you must walk or hire a carriage. Tonight you are walking the quiet road alone, your cloak pulled tight against the chill breeze and your hood over your head for further insulation. It is nearly December now, and despite your plan to begin the trek earlier, you've run behind schedule and now are surrounded by the thick velvet dusk. You shiver as the temperature is decidedly now on its nightly descent. Halfway through your journey, you come to the fork in the road and hesitate for just a second. Surely your eyes deceive you. A dreamy, floating orb of champagne light is off to the right, slowly bobbing on the roadside. You cross yourself and thank your mother silently, for she has taught you well. Never follow the lights, my dear, she has told you from childhood. You continue on your way, following the left road as usual to your grandmother's home, and quietly say a prayer for all those who came before you, as some have never returned from such an encounter. Thoughts of crossroads and their mysteries consume you as you hurry further from the beckoning light. Your mother taught you that crossroads are simultaneously damned, sacred, mundane, and mysterious, because they are liminal, meaning they are not one or the other, they are both, and neither. Be wary, she chided you when you discovered your first crossroad on your first trip to the market with her. They are full of demons and angels and fairies, and everything in between. She laughed as she lunged at you, seizing your small child's frame and tickling you. You agreed then to always treat crossroads and their inhabitants with respect. And now your mind turns to the legends of Papa Legba, the Haitian voodoo god of crossroads, liminal places in general, and of communication between the world of the living and the world of the beyond. You remember that he can help you should you lose your way while traveling, and this gives you fair comfort for a moment. Then, strange rustling in the woods off to your left sends your heart racing, and the knowledge of Papa Legba's dark alter ego returns as you rush forward on the road, your lantern swinging dangerously as you lurch forward forcefully. Kalfu, that is the alter ego's name. That's right. You have heard, indeed, that many of the fairies and the gods are quite unlike human people. They, like Papa Legba, seem to possess at least 2 fully formed egos. But how can this be? Although you cannot find an answer within yourself, you remember, too, hearing of the Egyptian goddess Hathor, who also is said to possess several egos. The thought begins to bring a throbbing pain to your temple, and so you focus on the road ahead. As a special note to you, dear listener, if you've not seen my most recent episode, Imaginary, I do encourage you to. I explicitly cover a great deal of information regarding multiplicity in human and non-human people, respectively. You may find it thoroughly enlightening and immensely helpful in your paranormal pursuits. To calm yourself, you tell yourself your most beloved true tale, one that your mother had told you following shortly the lesson about crossroads. Once upon a time, while out one evening, a sweet old lady came to a crossroads. In the middle of the fork, she saw a large pot of gold and endeavored to take it home with her. She pulled it along behind her, and as she struggled homeward with it, she looked back at it to remind herself of the riches that she was sweating over. To her surprise, she saw that it had turned into a pot of silver, but she reasoned that she was grateful because gold was too flashy, and robbers are afoot, after all. A while longer, she returned her glance to her prize. It had transformed again. Now it was a lump of iron. Still, she was grateful because it would fetch a fair enough price to ease her life. A bit further, and it had turned into a large stone. And yet she was ever thankful, planning to use the stone to prop open her door in the summertime. It was a fine stone, she praised it, when, in response, it leapt up, becoming a cow. She watched as the cow laughed maniacally and ran away. The cheerful old woman was delighted, as she'd just seen the headley cow, a precious experience indeed. She went inside and made herself her very favorite tea to celebrate the occasion, and lived happily ever after. I often reference the Faerie census for reports. In researching for this episode, I found myself immersed in the 2014 to 2017 edition of it, where the following encounter number 29, is located. This allegedly true tale is told by an anonymous Englishman who was around 65 years of age at the time of the encounter, and this encounter took place near Cornwall. He was out on a lonely country road somewhere between 9 p.m. and midnight. I was driving through a village near Hale. There is a crossroad with some street lighting. It was a windy autumn night, little traffic on the road, and I was driving quite slowly. I became aware of movement coming towards me, people, carts. I wasn't perceiving normally until I could focus on a very small horse, only a little larger than a Labrador dog. The horse was pale, sort of an electric blue, and there was white in its mane. As it cantered past, it looked to its right, directly at me. I know that it was followed by other creatures, possibly humanoid, though something was stopping me from focusing properly. Something passed between me and the horse. It was as if the creature was reading my state of mind and attitude. Oddly, as I became aware of the horse, I was completely unafraid. Odder still, I was full of joy and not surprised by what I was seeing. Surprise came only later, when I reflected on what I had undoubtedly seen. You walk in peace for a while, having calmed yourself. Not much longer now, you say in self-encouragement as the frigid breeze picks up into a wind in every direction. Then, up ahead and to the right, you hear a strange humming tune and spot a small light rising and falling as it moves forward towards you. Despite the chill, you feel a rush of heat and stiffen up as you walk towards it. A man emerges from the darkness, and you relax. You're both only passing travelers, you realize, and, judging by his appearance, he's not going to rob you, you deduce. He is dressed in fine, rich, dark blue silk brocade and thick white cloth accents of some kind. He carries a gold candlestick holder, one with a finger grip as is the standard for bedchamber use, which sparkles and twinkles in the light of the solitary ivory candlestick that the man is using to guide his journey. You each approach the other, and when you come face to face from across the narrow road, you gladly bob your head down in relieved greeting, meeting his smiling eyes directly. In response, the stranger offers you a grand smile and tips his large gentleman's top hat, which shimmers slightly in the candlelight, looking to be made of the same fine blue silk as his vest. "Ah, mind your lantern there, friend," he says in a warm, nearly fatherly tone, gesturing smoothly and quickly with a nod of his head towards your own light source. You take a second to appraise it. It seems fine, but you thank him nonetheless. "I appreciate that, good sir," you reply in a tone as like his as you can manage, though you realize that his voice has a soothing, ethereal quality, both thick and warm as caramel sauce, but as thin and liquid as a fresh creek, and you can't quite match it. The man bursts into a small chuckle, then tips his hat to you again before continuing to walk past you. You continue on your own way, but a few seconds later, it feels to you as though some strange spell over you has broken. Why would a man dressed like that, carrying a gold candlestick holder, be out in the elements walking at this time? And he had no cloak or coat. You spin around as it dawns on you as well that the breeze had turned into wind, and his candle remained lit, wholly unaffected. Alas, he is gone. He has disappeared from the road. You stand in stunned silence for a moment, turning this way and that in search of him, but he is truly gone, on his merry way. However, he travels. In mention of travels, here is another current age, allegedly true tale. I was about 7 or 8 years old, and one weekend I was visiting my grandparents, who at the time lived in the countryside near Bosnia in Europe. They were only about an hour's drive away, and we went early in the morning. Their house is in a wooded area, with a long winding road leading up to each individual house, of which there weren't many. Besides the roads going up to the houses, there is one section of the road that leads directly into the woods. Our car broke down exactly around that spot. Flat tire. Since we were very close to where my grandparents live, and since my folks knew that I was familiar with the area, they let me go for a walk while my dad fixed the tire. This was about 9 to 10 o'clock in the morning. They weren't really afraid to let me run around a bit. Being the curious kid that I was, I went for the forest trail instead, since the main dirt road wasn't very exciting. The trees were tall and dense, so even during the daytime, it was kind of dark. I went up the forest trail for a few hundred meters until I came to a crossroads. In the middle of the crossroads, at the very point that the roads fork, there was a small cave or an opening of some sort. I went a bit closer and I noticed what seemed like fireflies sparkling in the pitch black hole. I felt this presence, as if I wasn't alone there, as if the cavern was beckoning me to enter. And then I noticed what seemed like several pairs of smaller red eyes peering from the darkness. At this point, I was quite spooked, thinking that it was an animal of some kind, and I decided not to go any further, to just slowly back away. Nothing followed me, and I had no trouble getting back. I'm very close with my grandmother. She and I are quite alike, so I told her about the encounter that I had. She kind of laughed it off, saying, "Oh, honey, there's nothing there. I walk there every day." But I was adamant about what I saw, and she agreed that we'd go for a walk together to visit that spot. It wasn't far from her house, and we arrived there that same afternoon. We got to the crossroads, and, like she said, there was nothing there. No burrow, no cave, just a flat spot where the crossroads meet. No traces of it being dug up. Grandma asked me, "Are you sure it was here?" And I replied yes. She didn't think much of it, chalking it up to childish imagination, but she told me not to venture out here on my own again. We continued our walk, and I just stopped mentioning the event from then on out. But to this day, even after all these years, I still remember this, and vividly. I find it strange that I'm able to recall the details. I often contemplate what would have happened had I stepped closer, or worse, tried to enter the dark cave. I've read about, quote, evil, unquote, places in forests around the world, or places where time and space can be warped, people walking into what they describe as different timelines or alternate dimensions. Perhaps this was one of those places. When it comes to reports like this, many theories are offered. Hallucinations, a child's imagination, or the Fae, or some kind of paranormal predator. I'm not entirely sure what to make of this, but what do you think it was? As you enter now the woods on the last stretch of the journey, Your mind returns to the book you'd been engrossed in today. It was the whole reason for your tardy departure, a ghost story of sorts by Amelia Edwards, fresh from printing. In the story, the main character is a wealthy man who is on honeymoon with his new wife. He proceeds to indulge himself in a hunt and mistakenly stays out too late when he finds himself in need of shelter for the night. The book was just getting good, and you had longed to stay in and read, but you'd promised your family that you would arrive that evening for the annual Thanksgiving. By the time you lifted your head from the book, it was already nearing sunset, and you knew you'd be late. The book would need to wait. You stuffed it into your cloak pocket, lit your lantern, and left home in a frustrated whirlwind. You decided then and there that this would be the first, last, and only time that you allow leisure to disrupt your departure. Alas, you are nearing your grandparents' home, the familiar woods and road bringing you comfort. You ponder the rest of the book in your pocket and wonder if you'll have the time to read it over the next few days at the family holiday. You wonder, too, why the book is named as it is. You've never heard of such a thing. Several more minutes pass in near silence, the only sounds being those of the wind and the leaves it rattles about. The atmosphere is cold and creepy, but you cannot help the urge to whistle cheerfully to yourself. The visions of the Thanksgiving food awaiting you have stolen your attention, prodding your stomach into a rumble. Then, in the distance somewhere, you hear the steady clop-clop trot of hooves and occasional snorts. Unsure of its exact origin, you step off of the road to allow the rider or carriage space to pass, and you walk in the grass instead. Within moments, a black carriage is gliding past you, and you can feel the wind generated by it. Strangely, though, when you take a closer look at the carriage, the strong horse and the light driver, they are all somewhat transparent. You rub your eyes with your free hand, but when you open them again, all three are gone. How, though? 1 second there is a carriage with a driver and horse and the noise of hooves, but in the blink of an eye, they have vanished. This walk and this book must be driving me mad, you think to yourself. Though this may sound utterly insane, I have for you here what is said to be a true meeting with a phantom coach. Mary Corbett Harkis of Kent, published on May 4th, 1967, shared an event originally written down by her grandfather in his diary almost 100 years previously. The reference in Roy Christian's article, April 6th, to the death of the Marquess of Hastings in 1868 reminds me of a story that my grandfather wrote in his diary that year. Quote, "Heard of the death of the Marquis of Hastings yesterday in London. He was only 26 years old. A curious thing happened in connection with his death. There is a tradition in the family that before a death of a member of it, some other member hears a noise of carriage wheels driving to his door when no carriage is in fact there. This actually happened at the Castle, Cardiff, when Lord Bute was down here lately, and he even went to the door to see if a carriage was there. It was remarked at the time, Lord Bute being a Hastings on the mother's side." Unquote. My grandfather was Lord Bute's cousin, and knew him well. Some 60 years later, the then Marquess of Bute and his wife were at Dumfries House, their Ayrshire residence. One evening after dinner, they heard a carriage. They waited, but no one was announced, so they rang for the butler, but no one had come. The next day, news came that a member of the Hastings family had died. Returning to our story. Unable to control yourself now, you break into a near sprint for your grandparents' home. It may be no mansion, but it is a spacious and loving place for you, complete with every comfort your heart could desire, especially at this moment in time. Your lantern handle swings and creaks in protest, but the flame holds steady and bright in guiding you. You are sweating and feel feverish now, and know that your haven is only beyond the next curve, behind the trees. When you come around the curve, there it is. The windows are lit and warm. You hear someone playing the fiddle, and laughter greets your ears from somewhere within the house. You almost believe that you detect the scent of fresh pumpkin pie, too. At the door, your fingers fumble the doorknob. You are shaking and sweating beyond any ability to operate such an appliance, and therefore are simply rattling the doorknob in a bizarre, frantic fashion. Inside, the fiddle and joyful vocalizations cease. You hear gruff male voices and ominous clicks. Suddenly, the door unlatches inside, and your uncle's face, along with the nose of a shotgun, appear in the cracked door. When he sees you, he stammers your name. "Good Lord, are you all right?" The gun drops away, and in a second's time your grandmother has rushed over to see the cause of the commotion. She, too, gasps your name and pulls you inside. The entire family is staring at you in shock. It was late. In the woods. On the road. It was transparent. I saw it. It disappeared. You offer the family your best efforts at explanation, but they clearly fail. Your eyes focus on the lit lantern, which had been your only permanent companion for the journey. Grateful and attempting desperately to distract yourself in order to calm down, you touch it tenderly with your shaking fingertips. With a confused and concerned face, your grandmother carefully stoops down and retrieves the lantern from the floor, lifting it to her eye level as she rises to stand again. "But, my dear, how could you see anything, let alone see your way here? Your lantern is dark, and by the temperature of it, it has been cold for at least an hour." In staring up at her face, which was lit clearly and brilliantly by the bright lantern flame, it feels as though someone has physically struck you, and the dazed feeling lingers. In the silence, surrounded by your awestruck family members, you look around for a moment and take in the effects of the lantern's flame upon the home and the people within it. When you have gathered yourself enough to pose a question to your grandmother, you take a breath and squeeze your eyes in a quick, hard blink. Upon opening your eyes, you open your mouth as well. But when you do glance back to your grandmother, you see that the lantern she is holding has no flame at all, and the room is suddenly much darker, being now lit only with candles. "No, no, 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 no," you say over and over. Your hands rub your eyes again, and still there is no flame in the lantern. You try to stand, wanting to inspect the lantern yourself, but when you rise to its height, you must admit that it is cold and dark. impossible. Visions of your walk here flood your mind's eye, and your physical sight becomes blurry. The last memory you have of this arrival at your grandparents' house is the sound of your own weight hitting the floorboards. How fortunate it was that your whole family was there, and that they took such fine care of you when you fainted. How are you feeling now? Did you ever finish reading that book? And maybe most importantly, how was the pumpkin pie? It has long been insisted that roads, paths, travel, and crossroads are otherworldly. In truth, choosing stories for the show today proved a challenge because I came across dozens of equally intriguing and appropriate tales. I believe that there are many mysteries out there, and that these stories are the glimpses that we occasionally stumble upon. Fairies, aliens, dogmen, and ghostly hitchhikers, phantom carriages, and even phantom trains, strange lights and sounds, non-human friends and foes, goblins and ghouls and hags and jinn. Who knows what may await you this year as you go over the river and through the wood. Happy Thanksgiving.